What up, guys? Today I'm back with part two of the original backstory of the Saiyans and their entire society, and also just this one's going to be more than just the backstory of the Saiyans. There's also going to be a backstory of King Cold and Frieza and his lineage, and more of the Saiyan society as a whole in the structure. So let's get back into it. Now, in the last video, I ended off talking about how the hierarchy of the upper and lower class and how they send off, their babies to other planets and how that works and all that stuff. But there was also more that Toriyama gave us information about and explained. And he talked more about how the Saiyans viewed love and family and what happened with their children, their babies, and how did the Saiyans grow up in their society and how it would work and operate. And I'll go more into that and everything else because there's quite a bit of interesting stuff. Now, when it comes to love, love is a foreign concept to them. It's not even a concept that is actually a thing in the Saiyan society. They don't have a concept of family love, romantic love. The most they have is like love for like kind of your compatriots and like, when you fight or your team. But even then, it's not really love. It's more like, oh, we need to work together and support each other. And I'm here to defend you in this fight. But even then, it's like if they die, they're not going to shed tears or like give a damn. So what like Vegeta did to Nappa, it was kind of common in the Saiyan society. And what the way Bardock reacted in the original special was kind of a little bit out of Saiyan character because Saiyans usually they do, like I say, care somewhat about their teammates, but they don't care about them significantly. So the fact that he got that enraged did showcase that he was a little bit different than the other Saiyans. He wasn't as cold blooded. So the way the Saiyan society works is they don't when a male and female Saiyan get together, they don't get together because of love. They only get together to have a child, and they get together to have a child that's very powerful that could help, the Saiyan society and conquer other planets and sell off planets. So what they would do is they would try to find two powerful Saiyans or two decently powerful Saiyans, at least in their class, whether it's lower or upper class. They were not going to have an elite with a lower, so they would have an elite with elite or a lower with a lower. So when they would do that, they would basically kind of select them to get together to breed. Once then they would breed, they would have children, and their children would be raised to become warriors to fight under the same Legion army or whatever, right? So uh, people like Bardock and Gine, in the other one they said in the newer one they said they did fall in love, which was uncommon. So they did kind of talk about that a little bit. But in the original one, they didn't get together because they loved each other. They didn't mention Goku's mom's name, but they just said Bardock and stuff. The reason why in special he didn't care about Goku, like, oh yeah, whatever. That's just how they are. That's how he was like with his wife because they didn't get together because they cared for each other. They got together just to have, create an offspring for the Saiyans civilization as a whole. So when they would get together, they get paired up, the male and female. They wouldn't have any real like connection. They would just get together like, okay, let's have these babies, and once we have these babies, we will basically have them raised. So after that, they would have the babies without any love. Uh, the baby would be born, but once when the baby's born, the baby, like, how in our world, when you have a baby there in the infirmary and a hospital and they're kept there for a bit, but the mom is still there and the dad is there. Sometimes it shows up if he's going to work, whatever. And then they give them some time, like a week or two there, and then they leave with a kid. In the same society, it's different. Once when they have the child, they take the child, the basically the government takes the child, and as they take them, they put them into incubators. And as they put them into these incubators, which we also saw in the Broly film, it basically preserves the child there, and they're supposed to be in that incubator and then also the nursery until they're old enough to move and walk and at least be cognitive enough. So around like maybe 4 or 5, 3, 4 or 5, around there. Once when they get around those ages, they're done being the incubation and in there because now they've been raised properly. And then once when they do that, then they get sent back to their parent. And now they're a few years old, and then their parent teaches them how to fight, and then they get even more training. So there's quite a bit of complexities to that. So I'm going to try to go through as detailed as possible because it can be a little bit like, okay, so what does he mean by this and that? So what happens is both the mom and dad get together. The parents do not care. They didn't love each other. They just did to have a child. And once they have a child, the government takes the child and it takes them away for a few years so they could, physically, obviously babies take time to develop and mature, so they can develop. So the parents won't see their child for a few years unless they want to go to check them out in the hospital, but most of them don't, because they don't care. Like I said, they don't have love. They don't have this family bond or family love. They don't even have love for their partner. They only got together to have the child, so they don't really go to check out their child, and um, they don't go to see them. So the parent, y- one, it's like think of it like you have a child and the government comes and takes your child, takes them to some place for a few years, and you don't see your kid for a few years. Most people would go crazy, but for them, they're like, whatever, we don't give a shit. Just take them. They take them and then they bring them back a few years later. And the reason why they take them, there's an important reason why they take them. And then the reason why they bring them back to the parent, there's also an important reason there. Now, the reason why they take them is to make them more cold and cold hearted, because if there's been studies shown in the real world where like kids that don't get attention at a young age, even at infancy, it can develop some mental like problems and stuff like that. And as of like if a parent is distant with their child, or they don't touch their child because they need like skin to skin contact so they can have some connection. That's why the babies are so connected to their mothers, even though they don't understand the concept of a mom. They were raised inside, born inside the mom. They came out and then they made skin contact, but they also can do that with their father. So a lot of parents, they're kind of like advised to have a lot of skin to skin contact with their baby. That's also like when, like let's say you have a baby in your family that like a sibling or a cousin, and if you don't see them, they won't know who you are. But if you interact with them, you touch them, like you pinch their cheek or whatever, and you like rub their belly or something like that, they will get more used to your contact, and then they'll have that transfer of information. And as they do, they will become more familiar with you and say, "Hey, this is somebody that is close to me. They haven't harmed me. They touch me, and I feel secure around them." So they need that. But when you take them out of that mindset, especially in an early age, it does develop some mental stuff. And it's since the Saiyans are built very differently psychologically, not just physically, psychologically, they're more fucked up. By also doing that, that makes them even more fucked up, because if they were raised by their parents and have family, then they would be born, even if their family wasn't completely loving, they would have some concept of a family and have some form of love. And the same society does not want a family dynamic. They obviously want you to acknowledge that that's your parent, but they don't want you to give a fuck about your parent, and they don't want the parent to give a fuck about them. They don't want any emotional connections. So those few years, that's where you have emotional connection and contact, right? So to take them away, it prevents that emotional contact from early age, and that develops the stuff. So it makes them more cold, more ruthless, more psychopathic in nature. So they were like literally trying to breed them to be as cold hearted and as fucked up as possible. So that's why they take them instead of just letting the parent raise them. So if you take them for a few years, then not only do they physically mature and develop so they can understand the world around them more, but also they have the detachment from their family. They don't have any attachment to their family or anybody else. The only attachment that they have is to the society as a whole. So as they're detached to the family, they get brought back to the family. And the family, once they get brought back to them, is not like, oh, it's my child, or I'm going to hug my daughter or my son. It's basically good now that you're able to walk, talk, and understand, at least to a certain extent. We are going to train you now. So now the parents are training them, like the parent, like the father or the mother, train them. Obviously, they don't have all the time to train them completely because they're off doing missions and conquering shit, but they do have still enough time to train them. So they train them a bit, and as they train them a bit, they do it until they get to a certain age. I don't know what age they do it, but once they get to a certain age and they're trained enough from their parent, then they are shipped off, I think, into some like kind of military, like boot camp stuff for the sane army or sane regime, whatever you want to call it. I don't think Troyon really specified what it was, but that's what I remembered. So they take them there. So the government takes them again. And now that they had the detachment from their family, they didn't really care for them when they came back. And the only thing they got from their parents when they came back is obviously they got to live in the house, and they got to get fed, and they got trained. So now that they're trained, they at least have some understanding of martial arts. In general, Saiyans are biologically adapt to to know how to fight genetically, just from birth, which is crazy to think. So genetically, they are physically able to know how to fight and also manipulate ki. So other races can do that, but they have to really be trained like on Earth and stuff. But Saiyans genetically just have that in them. That's why Goku, when he first saw Master Roshi firing the Kamehameha, he was able to easily replicate it right after he did it, even though he didn't know, the concepts of ki and how to use it because he got further teaching from, from Popo and Kami. Goku had that he could do that with the mimicry ability, and that because uh Saiyans were just genetically predisposed to have martial fighting and and manipulation of ki, at least to a basic standard. They're not going to come out as like experts, obviously, but they have some standards. So even an untrained Saiyan who hasn't been trained would be physically stronger than other people, not just due to the gravity, but also the manipulation of ki, but they would also be more skilled than an average person. So like for us, most people are not really skilled at fighting. They have to be taught or trained or go through some fights, right? And even then, it takes quite a bit of time. But for the Saiyans, they naturally already have that. It's just that they have to work upon it extra. So they already had that, and then they got it additionally from their parent, and then they went to their where they got completely trained, and then the military, and then they got like new stuff and equipment and gear, and then this is where they were getting to prepare them for battle and combat. And then they had the Cybermen to basically they would plant the Cybermen so they were trained to see how strong they are. Obviously, Raditz was weaker than the Cybermen, so they couldn't do that way. And if you were too weak, like whatever, fucking weak ass bitch, just go over there. But the more elite ones would train by sparring the what's thing called the Cybermen, because Raditz was actually one of the even in the low class Saints, he was one of the lowest of the low class. Like he wasn't. I mean, he actually wasn't one of the lowest low class. Sorry, I was wrong about that because he does join Vegeta's army. He was one of the higher ones. Sorry. But yeah, usually around Saiyans around like hundreds of power level, like 900 or 800 stuff. So they're not that powerful, but yeah, that's just how it happens. So after the training from the parent, they're training from the Saiyan like army and stuff in the military. They train from a child to more like a teenage year. They don't even have to wait for them to be teenagers. They still trained as kids, and at that point, they're already sent off on missions as a young child. I don't know specifically how old, but we also saw that later on in the Broly film, like Raditz and Vegeta as young kids. But it also depends. It depends on their strength level and their prowess in general, right? So like if you already had elite Saiyan and you're had a high enough prowess, you wouldn't really need to be trained that much. You would do a bit of training and then you would just be sent off. Whereas the ones that were less had less ability would have to be trained a little bit more, and then at a certain point they would just be let out. So it depends on that. And then obviously the ones that were already shipped off to the planets, they're already they were already lower, low class Saiyans, but they were even lower on the totem pole. They were at the lowest, and by them being on the lowest, their trajectory throughout society is different. They weren't just taken out and put in incubators. They were put in incubators. They were realized that they were weak, but they would wait until they're like at least old enough where they would still be a baby, but old enough where they can still survive. They would put them on a ship instead of flying like how Goku was. Because originally Goku was a baby, but they changed it for some reason. Toriyama messed up the chronology and made Goku like a few years older. Whereas another one, he was supposed to be a toddler. So they send babies off to the planet, and then the babies are supposed to like survive somehow. I don't know, and then adapt. And then as a young kid's supposed to wipe them out and then come. So whereas the other ones, they're just in the incubators, and then after a few years, they're sent back to their parent to be trained and then go to the army. The way these guys do it is after that they, conquer the planet, instead of going back to the parent, they conquer the planet. Then they take them off the planet and then they put them right in the military and stuff. And then the parents don't see them. Also, the other kids that get put in the military, they don't get to sadly see their parents either, but their parents don't care and they don't care. So they don't really see each other. So the kids are going on their missions and the parents are going on their missions, and even at an early age. So they said even around that time, Saint society, even though they would live together, they barely lived together because most of the times it was the kids going off doing their own mission, coming back, doing reports and files and stuff, and then the parents coming back and doing that, and then the parents and the kids would interact a little bit here and there, but they would rarely see each other. So it wasn't just like, oh, the father doesn't get to see his kids because he's off doing work, and the mom. It's the mom and the dad don't see each other, and the kids don't see each other because they're all off doing their job. But that was like, and this is all before Frieza and King Cold coming into the mix. So you guys would be like, where's their stuff? But they came after. I'm just explaining their society here. So that's how they did it before. They just trained them and then they would send them off to go conquer planets and then do that. And then they would just be a part of the army. And that was their whole thing. And some people argued that, like I said in the other video, I talked about how I had some arguments with people. I stated how the modern day Dragon Ball's version of the Saiyans are a lot softer because they had people instead of sending, because we knew in the original, right, that if you were too weak, even for like a lower class, you'd be sent off to another planet to fight, just like what happened with Tarbell and what happened with Goku. So it's like they did that with even the Prince and Goku. So why aren't these guys getting sent off? And some people's like, well, they need scientists and they need doctors and they need butchers and this and that. And I'm like, yes, they do need other occupations because they can't just be warriors. They can't have a society purely on warriors. That's how it used to be pretty much, but they can't just have it this way, right? But there's a problem with that. I'll get it to explain that. But like they were saying, I was having quite a bit of disagreements with people. They were saying, no, you see, that only happens to some of them. That's only the ones that are in a part of the military. I'm like, no, 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 they're all mandated on there. That's how their fucking society runs. That's how the fucking it used to run, but Toriyama pussified them for whatever reason. So what did they? How did they do it then? Then they had like other jobs since the elite were the best of the best. They would be either the royal guards of King Vegeta, or they would be just the elite ones going to the most dangerous planets to conquer to get the most profit. The lower class ones would go to smaller or more medium ones because they just can't really handle it. And there would be more of a group for them because they're not that strong. And sometimes the elites would go by themselves. So it would only need like one or two because they're strong enough to do it by themselves instead of having a whole squad. Like, but it usually would have like around 3 or 4. Um, so what would happen for that is like, well, yeah, they have to have other occupations. But what happens if you're too weak, if you're lower class Saiyan, you would still be a warrior because for everybody, no matter who you are, no matter how strong you are or weaker you are, you would always be a warrior first. But if you want another classification, it's usually for the lower class because majority of the population was lower class. I don't know how much he said, but like maybe around 80 to 90% of the Saiyan population was low class Saiyans, so weak Saiyans, and only 10 to 20% of them were elite class Saiyans or powerful ones. So the elite ones had the most authority, they were the most powerful, they were the most wealthiest, whatever. And the lower ones, they were the least, but they also had other occupations instead of that. Whereas the elite, they were just soldiers. Whereas the other ones, they were soldiers first still, but they would what other occupation they would have, that would be the other thing. So they would have they would be the least would just be titled as soldiers or elite soldiers, and then the lower class ones would be titled as soldiers first, and then what other occupation? Like let's say engineer. So there'll be a soldier and engineer, or soldier chef, soldier butcher, soldier doctor. So that would be the secondary thing. Now, even though they're soldiers, they wouldn't be going into fighting. They'll be spending most of the time doing their actual other occupation. But if war happens and if they need to send somebody out and they're low on people or they found a big plan, they need quite a bit, your priorities as a soldier comes first over your priorities of whatever you're doing other thing because they value that more than anything. So even if you're an engineer, your priority of going to go conquer a planet is more important if it's a big thing that they need you. If they don't really need you, then yeah, just do your thing, but you're still going to be on call when it comes to that. Whereas the other guys, that is just directly their only motive. So that's how they did it. They still had that, but it wasn't just, oh, no, 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 you're too weak. You don't have to be a soldier. You can be whatever you want. No, you didn't let you pick. You were forced into this life. This is they chose you to it. You don't have a choice. It was a war. It was a warrior planet and race. That doesn't mean that a lot of them are very warrior like. No, when you hear like warrior civilization, that means the entire civilization was pretty much warrior like. Uh, so yeah, they were still like they weren't going always fighting, but they were still meant to be putting their duties as a soldier above any other job that they had or occupation they were given. But those were also still pretty important. So we had all that stuff and all the interesting things there. And then after that, some time passed on, and then there was this alien race that got into connections with the Saiyans. So what would happen was first Saiyans would conquer planets to make money and profit to sell off, but instead of just doing that, they actually became hired mercenaries for other clients. So there would be clientele saying, "Hey, look, uh, we're losing our planet, or we lost our planet. We have a ton of money somehow, and we're willing to pay you. So can you conquer this planet? That we found a suitable planet, but it's too powerful for us. We're not fighters. You guys are. We heard you're the best. So we want to hire you and some of your most elite or whatever, depending on how, big the planet is, whatever. They would give them a certain amount or sum to go conquer and kill the people and then give them the planet and then they'll get paid. So they would basically, they're hired guns and hired mercenaries to wipe out these civilizations for these other people that need the planet. Now, these clientele would either need it for because they just need a planet, or they will need it because they're probably like rich assholes. They're like, I got a ton of money and I want a vacation planet instead of a vacation home. So yeah, wipe these guys all out. So they have some sadistic rich asshole like, fuck this entire race, do a mass genocide, wipe out tons of people so I can have a vacation home that I might go to like once every 6 months. Like, come on. So they would do that. So they would be hired and then they would have a lot of connections. But as this was happening in this time, they were also kind of competing with another bigger one, and that was King Cold's one, which was also, they were hired under King Cold's thing. At first, they were just hired by him. And then later on, he basically just turned, like betrayed them and turned the tide on. There's like, hey, I was lying. I was just trying to use you guys. So then he took them in, which I will get into that. Now we're going to get into King Cold and Frieza's backstory. So what happened with King Cold and Frieza now? Now, this backstory is actually pretty interesting. So, King Cold, the planet that he was in, they didn't mention what it was planet. They didn't mention what his race was, but he was on a planet where the people there were powerful. They were, they were not as, I think they were around as powerful as the Saiyans, or maybe a little bit less, but they were still a powerful race. They were just more powerful. They were more powerful than the humans, but they weren't like overly powerful. They were still decently powerful, but they were also pretty peaceful, kind of like the Namekians. They were pretty chill. Actually, they were not even like Namekians. They were more like humans, right? Where we have some violent people, but we have some good people. We have some more aggressive countries. We have less aggressive countries. We have more like, there's a balance. It's not just completely evil, though there's a lot of corruption in this world. But like any regular society. So it wasn't anything too crazy. Whereas the Saiyan society was over the top and brutally violent. Their society was just regular. And they were powerful, but not overly powerful. So what happened was at one point, one of the race ended up having a child, and they were all asexual, kind of like Namekians. They would birth them out of as eggs. I don't know how. I don't know if they're out there, their ass, whatever. But they would birth an egg, and this is when King Cold was born. When King Cold was born, he was actually a mutant, and this mutation changed him. Not only did this mutation make him much, much stronger than the rest of his race, be actually making him the most powerful out of his entire race, but it also messed up his psychology because for some reason in Dragon Ball, when the race has some biological changes, they have some psychological changes too. So psychologically, even though his race were regular, like just like us, it's just regular, it's just like there's some bad, some good. His mutation not only made him the most powerful out of his race, giving him increased manpower, but it also warped his mind and made him completely kind of like psychotic and like he was kind of like a psychopath or a sociopath. So he was more fucked up and he had no care and no concern. So this kind of led some conflict because they would see sometimes, but he was really powerful and he was to the highest extreme. Also, we hear mutants like in, Marvel, and people think about Marvel where they have unique powers. And there are other mutants in Dragon Ball that have been mentioned, but the mutations in Dragon Ball is a little different than in X-Men and Marvel. In X-Men and Marvel, they have like different unique set abilities and their own abilities and all these other cool things they can do. Whereas in Dragon Ball, when they say mutant, all their mutation does is just make them more powerful than the race. Like they have the same powers, it's just that they're way more powerful. That's it. So it's like you don't see cooler, unique abilities like reality warping or time warping or shape shifting or any of this other stuff. They're pretty much just their people might look a little bit different and be more powerful. So it wouldn't be it isn't as creative. It's just, oh, they got more powerful. So he came out as the strongest, and as he came out as strongest, more sadistic, he was kind of pushing for one, he felt like he was the strongest and the best and he should lead the planet, but also he wanted his race. He's like, we we might not be the strongest, but we are strong. Or we are a strong race. We are a powerful people, and we could go and conquer other people. And especially with my power, we can dominate other races and take over them. And there are people like, nah, we're not gonna do that. I'm sorry, but that's kind of a little too much. That's a little fucked up. We're chill on that. And he didn't like that, so he had the power and he had he had the hunger for domination and control, and he wanted his people and his race to conquer, but they weren't a conquering race, but he was. So he said, you know what, fuck it. You guys are kind of bitches. So he was kind of at odds with them quite a bit. And at that point, he created Frieza. So he birthed Frieza. And as he birthed Frieza, Frieza was also a mutation and just as powerful, though King Cold was a little bit more powerful. But the difference with Frieza compared to King Cold was Frieza was even more evil and more sadistic. So his psychology was even more fucked up because of the mutation. So they were both mutants. They were the only mutants of their planet, and they were the most powerful of their race and the most sadistic. And as Frieza was born, he was born with such a high level of power that he had to create, weaker forms to basically control and capsulize his power. So he went from his final form that we see to his third, his second, and then his first form, which he would stay in because he would end up destroying too much. So at that point, both Frieza and his dad were on the same page of let's conquer, but the race wasn't. So they said, you know what, fuck you guys, we're tired of this. So they ended up destroying the entire planet. They didn't just kill the race; they blew up the planet, killing everybody there. And then they set their mission on, conquering other planets and doing their whole regime. This is kind of like with Lobo. Lobo did the same thing where he destroyed his entire planet because he was low but more rough. But theirs is a little bit different with the whole conquering stuff. So yeah, he was trying to get them on board to conquer with him because he felt like they should dominate over others because they're more powerful, kind of like the Saiyans. But they didn't want to do it unlike the Saiyans, so him and his son ended up blowing up the planet and killing the rest of his species. So there's no other Frieza or race members. Those are the only ones. A lot of people were like, oh, they might have other stuff. You're not gonna find another one. Or people dub them as the Frost Demons, right? You're not gonna find other Frost Demons because they've been all wiped out. So it's only these two assholes left. And then they created their own empire. They didn't say what it was, but later on, I think now we call it the Frieza Force. It used to be called the Cold Force, but now it's the Frieza Force. So after that, he declared himself King Cold. He was not actually a king. He just destroys people, and he's like, "Yep, I'm king now. I'm the strongest. Why not?" So he became King Cold. He created his own his organization as the Cold Force. And as he created the Cold Force, he was basically doing what the Saiyans were doing, conquering other planets, taking the species. The only difference was, unlike the Saiyans, he was actually taking these planets and ruling over them. And unlike the Saiyans would just use their own people, whereas him, since his people don't work, would wanted to work with, and he ended up killing them. He pretty much, him and Frieza would go to planets, wipe out most of the inhabitants, except for a select few, saying, "Hey," they would find the strongest and say, "Hey, look, you guys are the strongest, and it would be a shame if you guys died. We wiped out the rest of your race, but it doesn't have to be the same with you guys. If you want to survive and live, why don't you join our force? By joining this, you could you could get money, you can dominate, and then also on top of it, you can live." So even though it's fucked up, a lot of them said, "Yeah, I would rather live and work for the people that wiped out my entire race than just die." So that's how they would form it. So after a certain amount of time, King Cold and Frieza and them, or mainly King Cold at least at that time, would basically go to planets, wipe out the inhabitants, sell it to clients to make money. So he was making, not only was he making money, but he was also getting planets, and then he was also getting soldiers. So he was doing a smart business tactic. He was making profit by selling some. He was making getting some land by keeping some, and he was making a force and soldiers by taking some, by giving them the offer of like, hey, you could die or stay with it, or join me. And then later on, since he had built an empire of his own that was really big, and the Saints had their own empire, his one was just bigger because he was way more powerful and was more strategic with his, whereas they were more barbaric. Um, they took all of them, and then they were able to create an empire. And this is where they created their whole organization, and then they had a bunch of money and a bunch of wealth. But as this was happening, they kind of crossed paths with the Saiyans because King Cold realized, he found out that there was another species doing the exact same shit, and he wasn't gonna go at them to attack them, but he had kind of a plan to kind of absorb them into his own force without even telling them or revealing the information. So when he first found out about the Saiyans, he saw them as competition, but he didn't automatically go to attack them. He tried to trick them to see what they're capable of, and then try to like absorb them under his rule. And he was basically plotting against them, but they didn't know. So he King Cold and his people were sending some of his, soldiers out there to basically pretend to be clients to ask for their help so they could have them do mercenary jobs. So basically, instead of him, sending his own soldiers, he would send his soldiers to conquer other ones. But then for the bigger, more threatening ones, he would hire the Saiyan mercenaries. And Cold and Frieza don't give a shit about their people, but their men are still their workers and they make their profits. So they would rather hire some mercenaries that are not a part of their organization and let them do the big threatening missions, because if they do the threatening missions and they die, it's like, whatever. You're just a hired mercenary that died. Whereas these guys, there are people that died, even though they still don't care about them that much. But whatever. So for a while, they started building a relationship with the Saints, and the Saints thought that King Cold and his organization were like they thought they were really doing good work together, and they were making all these deals together and all these like exchanges with each other. So it's like, well, for the exchanges of the Saiyans service, the Saiyans were getting paid, but also while the Saiyans were getting paid, they were trading some of their technology. So King Cold found out some of the technology. Some of the two of the biggest technology that he found out was the Scouters and the Healing Chamber, which, like I said, and the Broly film, they kind of retconned it by saying Frieza actually was the one who introduced the Frieza Force, the one that they had these old original ones and they created new ones. That isn't true. What happened was the Scouters originally came from the Scootagens and they were killed by the Saiyans, and then the Saiyans started using them. They adapted it a little bit, but it was basically still the Scootagens tech. And then once when King Cold came into play, he started hiring them as hired mercenaries, but also taking some of their tech and paying them extra, saying, "Hey, we'll take this." And as they took the tech, they would use it to be a part of their army, and they would, modify it. Since King Cold and Frieza and them were already way more rich, they had a bigger organization and more advanced and whatever, and they were also more, business savvy. They got like more advanced like scientists and engineers, so they would understand how the Scouter would work, and as they would see the Scouter, they would pretty much modify the Scouters. So they went from old models to newer, more updated and better models, and they would keep on updating it. So they took basically the same stole the technology from the Sufuges that they killed, and then King Cold bought the technology from them and then upgraded the technology in his scientists in his force. So they upgraded their technology. Not only did they take that, they also took the healing chambers that they found and they upgraded that to make it more proficient, and also the Saiyan armor, because the Saiyans had their own armor and the Frieza Force didn't have that. So then they did it. So they learned the fabric. So all the stuff that they were getting from the Saiyans already got it from conquering the planet previously, but now they're getting incorporated them and they're advancing it more because he had all these other races and stuff. So at that point, they're just being hired. They thought they had good relationship until King Cold showed his true face and backstabbed the Saiyans, and then said, "Oh yeah, we've been having a pretty good business. We've been enjoying each other's company. I've been paying you guys very well. You've been doing a pretty good job. We've been training technology." Uh, about that business deal, it was never really a business deal. You were never working with us. You were working under us. I was just trying to get as much as out of you guys and trying to see. And you guys are clearly a weak race, and I can easily subjugate you guys. And the Saiyans at first like, what the fuck? Where did this come from? Like, we were just business partners. Like, yeah, we know we're bad guys, but we were business partners. What the hell? So, and the Saiyans distrusted King Cold for a bit, but they didn't care enough because they're like, we're getting paid, man. It's just a job. It's like maybe he doesn't care, but after he did that, they're like, "Oh, you son of a bitch!" So they're like, "We're gonna fight you." And as they tried, King Cole basically stopped their uprising, and they realized this motherfucker is too strong. So as he beat them, he said, "You guys have no other option. You guys are very valuable," as he does for every other race. That's why Frieza keeps on saying, "You're very powerful. You should join me, no matter what." Because that's how they created their empire, and that's just a constant way that they do their business. So they told him, "Hey, look, you guys revolted against us. I told you you're under our rule. We are going to subjugate you, and you fought against me. And normally I would destroy you guys, but you guys are so valuable. We've been working so well together. I know it kind of sucks, but we've been business partners. Let's just stop with the fighting. You can work under me, and you guys are doing the same thing anyway. I'll give you the same provisions. You just having more advanced stuff and have things better. So what's the problem? You might as well just accept us." So then they're like, okay, whatever, fuck. we can't fight back anyway. So now this is when they became from doing their own thing and be kind of a rival to Cold's organization to being under his organization. And then there was a bit of change. So King Vegeta was still the king, but he was kind of like now a false king because he was ruled over a bigger king, which was King Cold. Um, at this time, though, what was happening was the Saiyan society was changing a little bit. Instead of them just going to the Saiyan military to train and going out to do this stuff, they would now do this for the King Cold's organization, and they would be specifically trained under King Cold's organization. They would even have to be through a training thing to get a license. Kind of like if you get like a security license or whatever, or like you're a comp and you get like a badge. So they got like a license. So this is how they would get paid. This is how they would get healthcare, get paid, uh, you know, uh, do business transactions, all this stuff, go to the other planets, uh, give them an identification that who they are so they wouldn't be attacked. So this is how they would do it. And then now they went from instead of doing all that training for them, the Saiyans, and work for Saiyans, they would do it under, King Cold's rule. So he would do that for quite a while. And as he did this for quite a while, he would he would kind of start to get out of that position. We saw that a little bit in the Broly film. He would get out of that position and then have Frieza take over. So he's like, I'm gonna let my son rule. We don't know when he let him rule. In the movie, they showed it was kind of like around Vegeta as a kid, and literally right. It was weird because in the movie, he he destroyed the planet not too long after he took over the planet. I know they did a little bit of a time skip, but it wasn't that much. Whereas in the original one, he was actually when King Cold stepped down, Frieza was taking over command over the Saiyans for quite a while. So he was there for quite a while. So then he took the reins, and that's when things went to a little bit more of severe, situation with the Saiyans and them. The Saiyans already didn't like that they were being subjugated, but now with his son, who's even more cruel and is asking for crazier demands, is like, you guys were kind of fucking pushing it. So there was that happening. This is where it was kind of rising up for them to do a revolt at some point. And then there was something significant that happened. But also, I want to talk about the Ginyu Force. The Ginyu Force were also stated to be mutants of their own race and the strongest of their race. And there was like a little explanations on how they work. Like Guldo, she used the Psychopyrus to lift up girl skirts, look underneath it like a weirdo. Berter really found out his speed when he helped out his mom taking a piano a flight of stairs really fast. Raccoon was actually a ballerina. That's why his moves are really weird, like with his legs and stuff, and he's flexible. So he was actually a ballerina uh, in his world, which is funny to see. They showed him doing his moves. Uh, Jace, I forgot what he did. I think Jace played space baseball. uh, he was basically just he was just he was Space Yamcha. But yeah, he played space baseball. That's why he had the Crusher Bowl. He would play the Crusher Bowl. That was his. He was part of the Space Baseball League. So he would work under Frieza, but he would also do like his Space Baseball League, and he would use that move, the Crusher Ball from there. And then Ginyu, his normal original body was not that. The purple one we seen, he just took it from somebody else. As a kid, he was mischievous and he would get into a lot of fights. And as he would get into fights, he would just like switch bodies with stronger kids. And then as he got older, he would just switch bodies with stronger people to the point where he switched so much that by the time when he got to his purple like self, he didn't even know how his original self looked like. He's like, damn, how did I used to look like? He didn't even know how he normally looked like because he would jump from body to body and just kill the person. So he destroyed his original body and all the other versions of himself. And he just never seen how, he didn't remember how he looked. So there was a little bit of a backstory from that. But going back to the Saiyans, as this was happening, Frieza was kind of like, he was punking out King Vegeta a little bit more. And he was like, hey, I hear you have a son, and I hear he's the most powerful in the race because at that point Vegeta was born. He was the most powerful Saiyan in the race. King Vegeta had like around like power level of around 10,000, and he had a power level of 12,000. So Vegeta was stronger than his dad as a kid, and he was so strong in fact that he was able to for his training he had to fight multiple Cybermen, like 5 or 6 of them. And even as a 6-year-old, he was able to take them out casually. So he was able to take out like 6, Rad's level, beings. And also at that time, King Vegeta appointed General, Nappa, or Grand Vizier Nappa, to basically be the babysitter of Vegeta and be the commander at least for a certain time for his for like when they would go to planets conquered for his team. So he was the leader leading the charge. Even though Vegeta was stronger, he had more experience. So Vegeta was basically raised under Nappa. His dad was the ruler, but Nappa was basically his legal guardian. He was his royal guard, kind of like if you watch Naruto. Konohamaru, who's the grandson of the third Hokage, he got appointed a guardian to protect him and take care of him. Nappa was the same for Vegeta. So Vegeta knew him since he was a child. He knew him since he was a little baby. Once when he was born, Nappa was actually appointed to take care of Vegeta when King Vegeta was doing his own thing, and he was also in charge to take front point of the sorry for that. My alarm set off. But going back to that again, he was meant to basically take care of Vegeta. Also, he was meant to kind of mentor him, and then when they would go on missions, he was supposed to be the lead because he had the experience, and he was supposed to help Vegeta until Vegeta would understand, his role enough where he would understand enough, and then Vegeta would take charge. So then he would just be Vegeta's right hand man at that point, which also makes it more fucked up the fact that Vegeta killed him because he knew Vegeta since he was a kid. He was kind of like an uncle to him. He was his uncle, and he basically took care of him. He helped raise him. He dealt with him more than his own father. So it was kind of fucked up that he killed him. And he was his legal guardian. He was his mentor. He was supposed to be, the leader of the team, and so he can get into the role. So killing him, and then his right hand man. So killing him was pretty kind of fucked up. And then Raditz somehow got put in there. He was a lower he was considered an elite class, but he was on the lower end of the elite, like the lowest possible elite you could get. He was there, and he was just let on there. I think the only reason he was let on there is because his father Bardock was prestigious and known for being powerful, so he's like, you might as well just put him under there. So he got under Vegeta's work, but they both pretty much bullied the fuck out of him, which was funny to see. So uh that's what happened. But once when Frieza came in, Frieza wanted Vegeta under his rule because one, he's the prince, so that would give him more power and authority, and then two, Vegeta is the most powerful Saiyan there, so that would mean also more. King Vegeta didn't like that idea. At first, he wanted to say "fuck off, go fuck yourself" to Frieza, but he knew he was too powerful. He couldn't, oppose Frieza, so he had to accept his terms. So he allowed him to take his son, and he was mad. And even one of those guys like, "Are you gonna let him take your son?" He's like, "No, of course not." He's like, he thinks he's gonna have him, but I'm gonna fight it. I'm gonna revolt against him or fight against him. I'm just gonna let him think he has my son. But yeah, he reluctantly did it. He just let him go, and then Vegeta didn't know. He's like, "What's happening?" He's like, "You're being signed up for elite," and they were having a little bit of an argument, King Vegeta and Frieza, but Vegeta himself didn't give a shit, honestly. Vegeta himself was like, he got mad because his dad was like, because Frieza, what he was trying to do was send Vegeta on the most dangerous planets. He's like, oh, if he's that powerful and he's that great and he's the elite of the elite, why doesn't he? Why don't I just send him on the most dangerous missions? Because Frieza hates the Saiyans. The rest of his people that work under him, he doesn't care for, but he doesn't hate. The Saiyans, on the other hand, he hates them, and he's also kind of afraid of them. So he doesn't mind them dying. He kind of gets a joy out of that, but he also kind of has a soft spot for Vegeta, like he said. But that soft spot is mostly because he's the best of the Saiyans, and that's why. And since he was the son of the king, it means more to fuck with him because Frieza is sadistic. He likes the fact that the son of the king is basically he owns him. And he was even mocking King Vegeta, saying he's more like he's my son at this point. He's like, he's gonna be my son, he's gonna call me dad. And he did not like that. He's like, you motherfucker, you really fucking with me right now. So they had a little bit of a beef there, but Vegeta didn't give shit. He got mad. He's like, because King Vegeta's like, you can't send him on there. Those planets are too dangerous. You're just trying to send him there because you don't care if he dies. And then Vegeta's like, I don't care. He's like, let me go, father. He's like, I want to go to these dangerous planets. And Frieza's like, see, your son wants to go, just playing up to it. So he's like, okay, if you're gonna go, then at least have Nappa there because he's the best of our people, and he's the one I trust the most. So he went there with him and Raditz. They went on their first mission, and this is when they went on their first mission. Um this is where King Vegeta went to do a coup against him. It was weird because most of the Saiyans weren't revolting against Frieza, most of them weren't, but the only ones that were was Bardock after what he Frieza did to his comrades. That pissed him off, and he's like, "Fuck this guy! I know he's gonna destroy our planet, so I'm gonna kill him." And so at this point, Frieza was fighting simultaneously two battles. He was fighting against King Vegeta and his elite royal guards to come after and kill him, and Bardock by himself. Uh, the rest of the Saiyans didn't know, they didn't care. That's why they didn't join Bardock. It was supposed to be a stealth mission. But as this happened, Frieza already caught wind. He already knew that he was going to play him. So as he was doing this, he came in. Frieza ended up allowing them come there. Darwan and Zazor, Darwan and Dodoria, or Zarbon. Why I'm saying Darwan, sorry. Zarbon and Dodoria both wiped out the rest of the elite. And as King Vegeta ran in, Frieza hit and came out and nowhere uppercut of the bitch. You can even see then like I think it was like in the filler cutscenes or whatever. But you see him, Frieza's coming in, he's like, I'm gonna get my son back and get revenge on you, Frieza. And Frieza just one shots him, he uppercuts him and kills him. So he ended up killing him, and then the rest of the people that revolted ended up dying. So Frieza literally killed the rest of Zarbon and Dodoria killed the rest of them, and he killed King Vegeta. And after he killed King Vegeta, he literally, and you guys would probably have seen this when you watch the show or whatever, but this is pretty interesting. As he did this, he opened up the ship and he went up to meet Bardock. So literally, right, it's just funny because if you think about it, it's like, well, by the time when Bardock came there to talk shit to Frieza, he had already killed King Vegeta and stopped his mission to kill him. So King Vegeta tried to assassinate him with his elite guards. He just killed them, uppercutted that motherfucker, killed him, and then right after he killed him, Bardock shows up and says, "Hey, I'm not gonna let you take us down." And then now he's challenging him, and he just comes up and is like, "Man, I just took out the king. You're not shit." So then that's when he dropped his supernova, killed Bardock, and killed the rest of his soldiers that he didn't care, and blew up the planet. And that's pretty much the history of the Saiyans itself. The backstory of the Frieza race, of Frieza and his dad, the Saiyans, the mutations and stuff. Also, there's one thing that I want to point out. Goku was also had a mutation, but unlike the rest of the characters that had mutations that made them stronger, Goku's mutation actually made him weaker. The reason why Goku is the weakest Saiyan in all of history and had only a power level of 2 is because he was born with a mutation that made him weaker. So technically, if he didn't have the mutation, he would have been stronger, but it weakened him. Um, and that is more realistic because in real life, when we hear genetic mutations, it's it's negative. It doesn't give you enhanced strength comics. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes you weaker. It usually means you have cancer, like your cells are mutated, you have cancer cells, or you have some disease and you're dying, or you have some deformity. Which I'm not trying to like say anything negative about people with deformities, but that usually happens when you have a genetic mutation. So Goku's one is more in line with real world. When you hear mutation, it's more of a negative effect on your body than a positive. So Goku got more of the realistic one, but yeah, the Ginyu Force, all of them are mutants, but they got stronger. Uh, Frieza and his dad are mutants, and that's why they're so powerful. But Goku is weak because he's a mutant, and it's actually pretty interesting because when Goku shows up, uh, I think it was Captain Ginyu or one of the other members from the Ginyu Force stated, "What are you, a mutant like us?" He even stated, "Are you a mutant like us?" And that's funny. That's a little subtle hint at Toriyama stating, "Hey, Goku's also a mutant, just so you know." They just revealed that they're mutants and he's a mutant too. Goku didn't know. He's like, I don't know. He didn't acknowledge it, but Toriyama did confirm he's a mutant. So that was a little like a little wink, wink, nudge type of situation. So yeah, uh, Goku's technically a mutant, and they even pointed out that he's a mutant, but they got it wrong. They thought he was powerful because he's a mutant because they got powerful because they're mutants. He was actually weaker because he was a mutant. Now, some people might argue that, well, he might have been born weaker because of the mutation. That might make sense. But maybe the mutation also made him have higher potential of getting stronger later on. So it might have helped him later on. Who knows? I don't know. All I know is that that mutation at first made him weak. And that's the reason why the Ginyu Force thought that why are you so powerful? They're like, how are you so powerful? Are you a mutant? Because their assumption when their mutation, they got stronger. With him, they got weaker. Sorry if you hear a garbage truck. It's outside. It's early in the morning right now. But yeah, that was pretty much what happened. And then we know the rest of the story. But yeah, that was all the other details and stuff. So the Saiyans at the end, even before they got wiped out, there was only 2,000. One actually interesting fact that I'm going to give you before I end this video as a whole is the fact that, what's the thing called? That I don't know if you guys ever knew, but we do get revealed how old Nappa is when he first arrives to not planet, to Earth and dies. When he first arrived on Earth and died, he was over 60 years old. We don't know how old is 60, but he was over 60 years old. So the Nappa that we see that's fighting against the Z fighters and killing them all is a 60-year-old Saiyan. He was one of he was historically one of the oldest Saiyans alive in all of history. He was even older than King Vegeta. So he was one of the oldest Saiyans in history alive. So that means around the time when he was training Vegeta, he was probably around 40 something. And by the time he got there, he was in his 60s. So yeah, he was only 20 years off before he would turn 80 and rapidly age. But at that point, he was 60 years old, which is crazy to think that an old man was beating the fuck out of all these young guys. It was a 60-year-old guy beating up 20-year-olds. He was basically dogging up and a 5-year-old, which is pretty fucked up. You're fucking up a 5-year-old at 60. But yeah, he was an old man, so he was 60. Some of you guys didn't know that, but yeah, I always thought that was pretty interesting and cool from him. Um, but yeah, those are the interesting facts of there, and that all the backstory. This was pre, Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball Minus and all that shit. This was before the retcon. You can't find it now. If you go on Wikipedia or any other stuff, they're just going to give you the more modern one. I've tried it, and every time I looked at it, it just gave me the information that Troyam gave now. So it's going to be only the retcon backstory, but this was the original backstory. It wasn't 100% exactly the original backstory because, like I said, this was before even 2013 or 2012 when I read this. I think it was around 2011 or 2012 when I read this shit. So it's over a decade now. The fact that I remember this and I was a child when I read it, should be, it's very impressive enough, but that's all the information. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed these two videos, going through the history of the Saiyans. I thought it was pretty fun and interesting to talk about. So yeah, I want to know your guys' thoughts on it. Did you guys know this? What you guys thought about it as a whole? And what do you guys think about the retcons that we got from modern Dragon Ball? So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed and stay tuned for next time.